it's just an option. It's just something I found that could be sick.
I just mean in general. I think that's a really cool option, but like, what the fuck, dude? Well, hello again, and welcome to another episode of the MTG Thoughtcast. It's your two favorite brothers on the internet talking about our favorite game, that is Magic the Gathering. And today, we have a pretty special one. There's been a secret layer drop that is ultimately controversial. I'm Joseph, and across from me, both on your screen and in your ears, is John, my brother, also here to talk about Magic. John, how you doing today?
My audio port comes from earhole number 2.
That's right. Sure does. That's stereo.
Hello,
this brother's in stereo. Feeling good, John? Ready to talk about some Magic?
Joseph's in the left ear. I'm in the right ear.
That's right, as it should be. Levi, do some panning here.
Hey, we're doing all right. It's the wonderful Christmas season, and that means there's going to be plenty of magic to be had this holiday season.
Ooh, Christmas magic.
Whoa.
Aww, that's so sweet. All right, well, today, like I said, we're talking about a secret layer deck that's dropping. This is the third of them that they've done, right? Because they've done the Heads of Win, Tails You Lose, which was ultimately controversial because it took a year and a half to ship. And then they did Raining Cats and Dogs, which was fine. That one worked. Mm-hmm. That one worked well. So keeping with the flip-flop, we have another controversial one. But before we dive into all of that, a little bit of upkeeping that we have to do. If you enjoy this video, us talking, this kind of content, scroll down just a little bit on your page. Give us a likes, comments, subscribes. Helps us a ton with the algorithm. Makes the robots like us. We show up on your feed more often. Everybody's happy. While you're down there, if you want to jump into the real conversation, play some games of Magic with us, get access to me and John and everybody in this wonderful Thoughtcast community, you can join our Discord, linked down below. It's right there in the description. It's totally free. We have a ton of fun there. I was just auditing somebody's Pauper EDH deck before we dived onto the episode today. So I'm always around there, just kind of floating. I'm lurking. I'm like a little rat in the sewers, just climbing through the Discord. But so if you want to be a part of that and you want to lurk around with me, just join our Discord. It's super fun. Okay, I think that's everything. Oh, shout out to our Spotify listeners. I know John's gonna get mad at me if I don't.
Okay.
Just kidding. I love our Spotify listeners. They're great. But you could be watching our faces too. That's a thing you could do. Except I do get it because I'm a Spotify for podcasts guy. So I'm with you in spirit. But not in face.
Yeah, as somebody who does morning shifts as well, I love Spotify. So thank you to all of our audio listeners.
I'm about to pay for a YouTube Premium subscription so that I can shut my screen off while I'm listening to something.
It just went up in cost too. Did you see that?
Oh, nope. I haven't had it in years. So, okay, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about a secret layer deck. And this is the secret layer commander deck, 20 Ways to Win. Sorry, I had a big plosive there. This is the secret layer commander deck, 20 Ways to Win. What have we done here, John? What are they trying to do?
Well, what it looks like they're doing with this secret layer is, firstly, it's a 5-color build. What the backbone of this deck seems to be encompassing is the multitude of types of cards that they've printed over the decades, I suppose, at this point, because they're pulling some really old ones here out of this as well. These are the cards that have the we refer to them as alt win cons. They're the ones that say, do this particular hoop jumping, and if you succeed in doing that, you get an automatic game win. And
you win the game.
Yeah, just out the gate with ones like these in and of themselves already have a bit of player controversy behind them. It's because things like these is there's two edges to it. On the one hand, there's some really, really cool and interesting pull strategy to these types of cards. Be like, hey, do you want to try to have a different win condition of the game instead of just doing like combat damage or even some other like alternate ways of winning the game, like decking out an opponent or things like that, or poison even for that matter? It's like if you it encourages some weird and sometimes non-functional game design or pieces that you need to throw into a build to be able to get through the hoops that are required for some of these cards to do what they ask of you to do. And your reward for building your deck in an unconventional way is winning, I suppose.
Yep.
So on one hand, there's really, really cool deck building strategy behind this. On the other hand, you've got your opponents that are trying to win through the normal conventions, and then you just say, by the way, I've got this card, I did these hoops, you all are finished now. Sometimes that can be salty.
Definitely salty. I would say certainly is a salt sower of mechanics. As somebody who regularly casts Approach of the Second Sun, which is my favorite of the all win cons, sometimes you get some dirty looks just for playing one of these alternate win cons in your deck, let alone having technically 16 of them in your deck, which we'll get to once we get into the deck building. But the deck is called 20 Ways to Win. 3 of those are pretty standard ways to win. You've got dealing your opponent's life total. Taking your opponent's from starting life total to 0 is the easiest and most common way to win. Commander damage is another one of those, which is taking 21 damage from any given commander. The third way to win, that's kind of a standard way, is your opponent's drawing on an empty library, which is sort of included in this deck. Technically, I think they're being pretty liberal here with that win. And then there are 17 alt win cons in this deck. Different cards that say, meet this condition, you win the game. As well as what they are calling support for those things. So there's, once again, they're being relatively liberal here. So let's go ahead and just talk through all of the 17 of those win cons. Let's see what we're working with here. There's most of them are on creatures and enchantments. The commander for the deck is Goshintai of Life's Origin, which is a 4-mana 3/4. It costs 3 and a green, but it is a 5-color commander because of its 5-color activated ability, which is white, blue, black, red, green. Tap it, return an enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And then whenever it or another non-token shrine you control enters, you make a 1/1 colorless shrine enchantment creature token. You would think that with a shrine commander, they might include some shrines in the deck, and that is where you would be incorrect. So at most, this is going to be entering and making itself a 1/1 to come with it. So it's 2 bodies on 1 creature, which is good. And it has some recursion for any enchantments that you might have lost along the way, as people might be taking care of them. So that's the commander for the deck. First win con we're coming to is Felidar Sovereign, which is a creature. It's a 6 mana for a 4/6. Vigilance, lifelink. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 40 or more life, you win the game. This one is unbelievably simple and is pretty busted in Commander, where you start with 40 life. Most of these cards now would be formatted to say if you have 20 or more life than your starting life total, you win the game. That's not the case on this one. You just play it. If you have more than 40 life at your upkeep, you win the game. It's really simple. Triskaidekaphile is 1 and a blue for a 1/3. You have no maximum hand size. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have exactly 13 cards in your hand, you win the game. And you can pay 4 and draw a card with it. Pretty good one. Next up, we've got 20-toed Toad, which they are counting as 2 win cons. We'll talk about that. It's pretty similar to Triskaidekaphile, actually. It's 4 mana for a 3/3. Your maximum hand size is 20. And whenever you attack with 2 or more creatures, you put a counter on 20-toed Toad and draw a card. And then whenever he attacks, you win the game if there are 20 or more counters on it, or you have 20 or more cards in hand. So that's why they're counting it as 2, because there's 2 separate win conditions on this. We'll get into this later, but +1/+1 counters is a way to win the game in this deck. So this is one of the sort of main themes is +1/+1 counters. So there will be ways to put counters onto the 20-toed Toad before you have 20 cards in hand in this deck. So there's that one. Hellkite Tyrant is a 6 mana, 6/5 with flying and trample. When it deals combat damage to a player, you gain control of all of their artifacts. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 20 or more artifacts, you win the game. Lovely. Let's see here. Scrolling down a bit farther. Oh, we have Biovisionary in the deck. 3 mana for a 2/3. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 4 or more creatures named Biovisionary, you win the game. There aren't clones in here. So this is
one. There's one spell that makes clones.
For sure. There's one spell. Again, we'll get into that when we talk about some support. We'll get into that when we talk about support pieces for this. But Biovisionary, I would say, is the worst of the win conditions in here by a long shot. Diving into our sorceries here, we have Approach of the Second Sun, which I've already mentioned. It's a 7 mana sorcery. Basically, if you cast it twice, you win the game. As it resolves the second time. The first time that you cast it, as long as it resolves, it goes into your library 7th from the top and you gain 7 life. So it gives you itself twice as you get through it. It's a really cool way to win the game if you can draw some cards, because then you don't actually take 8 turns getting to it. John, I know you have some thoughts about Approach to the Second Sun.
It just that probably of the pile that's here, it's going to be the one you probably win with the easiest.
Yeah, easily.
I'd say.
100%.
But in that regard, because it reads as just basically a sorcery that says, if I cast this, I win, it's probably the saltiest.
100% it is. All right, so as we dive into our enchantments, this is where the majority of our win conditions are going to come from, which is why Goshentai is the commander here, because if any of these get removed or whatever, you can just get them back for a measly 5 mana. So Happily Ever After is our first one. Yeah, it's a 3 mana enchantment. When it enters, each player gains 5 life and draws a card. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 5 colors among permanents you control, there are 6 or more card types among permanents you control and or cards in your graveyard, and your life total is greater than or equal to your starting life total, you win the game. That's a lot of conditions to hit on one card without any actual 5-color permanents in the deck. Because Goshentai doesn't count for that. It's a green permanent as far as Happily Ever After is concerned, and it makes a colorless shrine. So I think that Happily Ever After is going to be a very difficult one to achieve in the deck. Next up, we have Revel in Riches, the 5 mana enchantment. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you make a treasure token. Beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasures, you win the game. So this one you just need treasures for. Super easy. Moving on, Helix Pinnacle. A classic. This is a certified classic. It's 1 mana for an enchantment with Shroud, so no one can target it. You can pay X mana to put X tower counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 100 or more tower counters on the enchantment, you win the game. Nice and simple.
Yeah, a lot of work feels like to get there, but
100 mana. That's it.
Technically speaking, there's a Seedborn Muse in the deck, so it's like this one's
100%.
This one's not unachievable, but
for sure,
still very tough.
Speaking of counters on win conditions and enchantments, we have Simic Ascendancy in the deck as well. It's green and a blue for an enchantment with an ability of 1 green and a blue to put a counter on target creature you control. Sorry, a +1/+1 counter. And then whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on a creature you control, put that many growth counters on this enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, if this enchantment has 20 or more growth counters on it, you win the game. You'll hear us say you win the game quite a lot here. This one I actually think is pretty simple to get to because, like I said, there's a lot of +1/+1 counter synergy in the deck. So Simic Ascendancy, you land that thing, you start spreading some counters out. You're gonna get to 20 pretty quickly here.
This is an enchantment you pretty typically see even outside of just win con condition things.
Oh, for sure.
It's just great with 1/1 counters.
Definitely. I'm kind of against playing it in a +1/+1 counters deck, just because if you've put 20 counters on things, you're probably winning the game anyway. So it feels a little win more in a regular +1/+1 counters deck. But in something like this that's just trying to get alt win cons, it is pretty good and pretty cool. Test of Endurance is our next one. It's 4 mana for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 50 or more life, you win the game. So it's very similar to this Felidar Sovereign, except it's cheaper and requires 50 life. Also is going to be pretty easy to get to. Moving on from there, we have a Mechanized Production in the deck. It's a blue enchantment that costs 4. It's an aura that enchants an artifact you control. At the beginning of your upkeep, you create a token that's a copy of enchanted artifact, and then if you control 8 or more artifacts with the same name as one another, you win the game. Spoiler alert, you're going to be enchanting a treasure with this to try and get 8 treasures. This is essentially another copy of Revel in Riches in the deck. You make a treasure, you put the thing on it, and then anything else that makes you treasures also makes artifacts with the same name. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 8 of those, you win the game. That is sort of the secret mode of mechanized production here. Ready for a weird one, John?
I'm ready.
We got Liliana's Contract in the deck.
Yeah.
This is a 5-mana enchantment. It's black. And it says, when it enters, you draw 4 cards and you lose 4 life. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 4 or more demons with different names, you win the game. Are there demons in the deck, John?
Wow, golly, you just need 4 different demons. I'm sure they crammed this deck with as many as possible.
0. No demons in the deck. Absolutely none. Wild. Just wild choices. So the secret second half of this is Maskwood Nexus, which turns all of your creatures into all creature types. So if you just have 4 creatures with different names and a Maskwood Nexus down, that meets the condition of having 4 demons with different names. I don't like it, but we're moving on. It's cool because it draws you cards. Like, that's neat. 5 mana draw 4 is pretty good. I would do that.
Yep.
But we're moving on from there. So Male's Aria is the next one. It's red, green, and a white for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, God, this one's a novel. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, if you control a creature with power 5 or greater. Then you gain 10 life if you control a creature with power 10 or greater. Then you win the game if you control a creature with power 20 or greater. So having a creature with power 5 or greater is important to start this off. Otherwise, it does absolutely nothing. With a creature with power 5 or greater on the board, it starts to put a +1/+1 counter on each of your creature. Aha, synergy, +1/+1 counters. And then as those continue to grow, or you make a bigger creature, at a 10 power creature, you gain 10 life in addition to doing the +1/+1 counters. And then if you control a creature with power 20 or greater, you win the game on your upkeep. So there's that one. For 3 mana, it's not bad. I hate that it does absolutely nothing if you don't control a creature with power 5 or greater, which there just are not many of in this deck. I'm going to doing a quick search here. I don't see a single creature with power 5 or greater to start us off. Hellkite Tyrant. That's it.
Hellkite Tyrant, Heliod, Sun Titan.
Okay, all right. There's a bit more than I thought, but still. It's
just that.
3. There's 3 creatures with power 5 or greater to start us off. Once again, this is what we're doing today, is we're just reading through this and then fixing it. So that's Male's Aria. Okay, last few here. That might be it, actually. Oh, no, sorry. There's one more. There's 2 more. So we have a Halo Fountain. It's an artifact now. So it's 2 and a white for an artifact with just a ton of abilities. First ability is a single white mana, untap it. Untap a tapped creature you control to make a 1/1 green and white citizen. Second ability is 2 white mana, tap it, and untap 2 tapped creatures you control to draw a card. Third ability is that 5 white mana? It's really hard to read. 5 white mana, tap it, untap 15 tapped creatures you control, you win the game. I like Halo Fountain a lot. I think you do as well, right?
I do, yes.
Yeah. Because it generates its own tokens. So if it sits there long enough, it will win the game, kind of on its own. Man, they just don't make it easy to make 15 creatures in this deck, though. We're starting to get into the problems of the deck, and I want to talk about what's cool about it before we get into that. So I'm going to save all of my notes for what's wrong with it for a second.
But hit us with that last win con.
John, why don't you take us away on this one?
All right, to cap off this 5-color deck, your last win condition card is Maze's End. This is a land. It enters tapped and makes a colorless. But for 3 mana and tap it and returning it to your hand, search your library for a gate and put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Then, if you have 10 or more gates with different names, you win the game.
Gates. They couldn't, which, okay, again, talking about what's cool about the deck. That's a neat way. If you're already doing a 5-color deck, you could do a Mazes End alt win con with gates to begin with. Like that's a thing that people do already. So
Mhm.
having this in your alt win con deck is cool, and it's a cool way to do it.
Excellent. Yes.
Did
Yeah,
they
it's
include support for it?
one.
Nope.
There is one sorcery that
Yeah, you
grabs
get
gates
a circuitous route, and that's it.
and no way to grab Maze's End.
Oh, because it's not a gate.
No, it is not.
Oh my god.
Yep, there are no ways to tutor out Maze's End, and you have one card to tutor gates. So,
Which actually
good luck with that one.
that takes us to a problem of the deck. There are no tutors in the deck whatsoever. So if you end up with all 20 of these win cons go in pretty different directions. I have these categorized into a few different sort of clumps, but they go in pretty different directions. So if you draw the like quote unquote support for the wrong half of the deck, you're going to sit there and do absolutely nothing. So it makes sense that they would include Maze's End with no way to tutor it out and a bunch of gates and no way to have those gates come in untapped. So
other than Gone to Gate. Gone to Gate is there, but again, no real way to tutor it.
Right, exactly. So let's just start. What do you think about the deck, John?
It is certainly a pile of cards. I'll give it that. It's just like I think I went on this tangent a little bit on our Discord a little bit, like just kind of seeing this kind of thing as someone who is a very big fan of making alternate win con cards work. Like again, as a proud owner of a Gates deck, as someone who actively uses things like Felidar Sovereign, and I used to play stuff like Revel in Riches and things like that, and I love the design philosophy about stuff like Biovisionary. Like someday I'm going to make a clones deck that's got Biovisionary in it as a means of like, hey, this is where you want to put your clones at, you know? And your other friends that are in here as well, like apart from my feelings of Approach to the Second Sun, but it's clearly made its mark as a really, really good card. Individually, thrown in as is into decks that can support them, these are great. This pile is just a absolute slap in the face to anyone who enjoys this kinds of thing. It's like they thought that like, hey, everybody likes trying to win the game in different ways. Let's give them all the ways to win the game. But
right,
you just made an incohesive pile that either you upgrade like we're about to do and make it good and everybody despises it, and then you end up not liking your alt win con cards. It's like basically it's doing Control the hard way.
For sure.
And it just makes me frustrated to see this here. It's like make an alternate win con style of deck, but like does it have to be all of these? Certainly not.
It could have been 10 ways to win the game, and you could have put support in. That gives you 10, well, I guess that gives you 6 slots of support for those 10 cards, but even that would have been better than just throwing 20 alt win cons and a few. There are some cool inclusions in here. I will give them this. There's some really neat stuff that's going on to kind of trigger a couple of different of the win cons. For example, when I came across, I was like, why is Tari and Mauler in this deck? Like, what are they doing throwing a Tari and Mauler in here? And you know what? It's a shapeshifter, so it's a demon, and it gets +1/+1 counters, which counts for both Male's Aria, Simic Ascendancy. This does cool things where it's like, oh, this actually ticks the boxes for a couple of these. If they just gave it a little extra something, then I think that they would have been cooking here. But unfortunately, I think I have to agree with you, where I just don't think that this is a playable deck. Like, you're either going to you have to draw like your perfect win condition and your perfect support pieces basically in your opening hand. Otherwise, you're just not going to come across them. Like, there's basically no card draw outside of Liliana's Contract in this deck, and a card that I'm definitely cutting from the deck, which is Drown in Dreams. Despite that, I think that they're counting this as the mill win con in here, the Drown in Dreams, which is X2 in a blue. Choose one. If you control a commander as you cast it, you may choose both. Target player draws X cards, or target player mills twice X cards, which isn't even a win con because it's target player. You could maybe like mill one player for some amount of cards, but I think that they were getting real fast and loose. They're like, how do we get to 20 here? I know, Drowning Dreams. That's like your only forms of draw in this deck. There's basically nothing else. So, man, we got some work here. The other cool things about the deck, let's talk about it real quick. Other cool things. The art, amazing. Like the alt art on some of them with the Tanukis, kind of cool.
I thought it was cool at first. Now I'm kind of off of it. It's too goofy, I think. It's just a little too goofy. Like, Tanukis are cool. Don't get me wrong. But just, I don't know. It's being inconsistent, I think, is my problem. If it was maybe a Tanuki style that was the same across every single win condition card, like, changing up the art style a little bit, that's fine. But, like, you know, you're purchasing just this Secret Lair box as is, and, like, you're going to have a mishmash of art styles in and amongst the deck in and of itself. And, like,
yes,
that's cool for some people, but, like, for me, I want a consistency.
Yeah, there's only 10 cards in the deck that have new art. Which,
and
for those keeping track at home...
Are you counting one of those as the token as well?
No, I'm not. Which, there's 2 rainbow foil. For some reason, if you find some way to make a second shrine, you could use the second token in there. Yeah, it's so it's 10 borderless rainbow foil cards with new art. They also have included 16 updated non-foil cards with the Secret Lair set symbol. So that's things like the crib swap that's in the deck. They've changed it from tribal instant to kindred instant, and then a bunch of the enchantments. They've thrown the new enchantment border on. So things like that. They have actually done a little bit of upkeeping on this. And then there's 74 non-foil cards, and you're gonna hate this, John. They all have the Planeswalker symbol from like the list.
Yeah.
Every single one of them.
Yay.
What a mess. It's retailing for $149 as well. So this is not a cheap thing. So I'm frustrated that you have to buy this and also fix it. So this is me lamenting with anybody who's excited about this deck that, like, hey, I'm sorry that you're going to have to pay $150 for it, and then you're going to have to pay to fix it. We're here to help you fix it. So, John, why don't you just give me some direction here that you're thinking of going for fixing this, and then I'll tell you what I'm thinking about doing. We can talk about some cool inclusions, some cool ways to go about it.
All right. Well, let's start from the top and work our way down. Would you keep the commander?
I fixed the deck, including keeping the commander, because I want to add shrines into this deck.
Okay. If you were to change the direction around in any way, what different commanders would you want to see? Like, what do you think? Because I have a little list, if you're interested.
What's the one that is a 5-color enchantment on the back? It's a flip commander.
That is a Sika. That is a Sika, God of the Tree, and Prismatic Bridge.
Yes, I only ever think of it as the Prismatic Bridge. I'm like, what is that card on the front?
Typically, as it is. Yes, that's one of my options as well, and that would be very, very sick as well.
Yeah, because it's card advantage. There's 0 card advantage in this deck.
Yeah, that would be a real good one. I've written down a few others
as well. The 5-color Sisse.
Like the Weatherlight Captain. She looks for legendary specifically though, so like I don't know if that's super helpful to you. But I've got a spicy one when we're talking about enchantments later. But I have a few other options here as well. If you kind of just want to play the strongest that you can as far as 5-color is concerned, this feels like a home for Kenrith. Like, it kind of has to be. You know, he gives you your 5-color support. He's got all the best abilities on him, including card draw and reanimator and +1/+1 counters.
Yep. So, seems right.
Kenrith would be a very good support for this as well.
Does Kenrith have a target on his head, though.
Yeah.
If you sit down at a table and you put Kenrith in the command zone, people are gunning for you.
You're already playing alt-win cons. You're probably already the target anyway, right? Ramos Dragon Engine would probably be one that's of less power level as well, right? Just gives you
+1/+1 counters, gives you mana.
5-color, it's fantastic. A spicy one I found, if we dip more into doing it with Enchantress, the new Marina Vendrell from Duskmourn. It's a 5-color legendary that on enters goes 7 cards deep and puts all enchantments you find there into your hand.
Absolute fire.
Yep.
Throw some rooms in too?
Yeah, throw some rooms. You can add that room that's a win condition room. Fantastic.
Whoa, 21 ways to win the game.
Now your rooms enchantress alt win cons that you have a commander that's now
Yikes, dude, what are we talking about? What are we doing here?
It's just an option. It's just something I found that could be sick.
I just mean in general. I think that's a really cool option, but like, what the fuck, dude? All right, carrying on.
What would you add or remove, or like what would you add into this as far as like other win condition cards?
I'm not adding any more win conditions. I think we are capped out here.
I think you're capped out. Okay.
I'm set on win conditions. I think what this deck needs is more support.
Okay. If then in that regard, because I guess this is what I took my notes for, since Joseph went in his own direction, I found a couple other really good pieces that would fit into here if you're looking to swap out or add or change some of these things that are win conditions.
Very cool. Talk to me about it.
The first ones to start with is actually the cards that say are not necessarily the ones that say you win the game. I'm talking about the ones that say a person loses, because those are kind of the same thing.
You taking me through the door, John?
I'll take you to the door. Door to Destiny.
Let's go through the door.
Not Door to Destiny, excuse me. Door to Nothingness, excuse me. Door to Nothingness could be in this as well, because it is a 5-color activated artifact thing. But other varieties of cards as well that just say either all the opponents lose, or a particular player loses as well. One really, really cool standout one that I saw, because there is a little bit of a support for life gain in this deck as well, is Angel of Destinies.
Yeah, absolutely fire.
It's a big flying double strike angel that says when a creature you control would deal damage to somebody, you and that opponent each gain that amount of life. And then at your end step, if you have 15 more than your starting life total, any opponent that Angel of Destiny has attacked this turn loses the game.
So good.
If you're already doing life gain cards in here, like for the Felidar Sovereign and Test of Endurance, there's a Heliod in here as well. There's a couple Soul Sisters in here. So like if you're life gain centric as well, Angel of Destinies would be a fantastic include.
Yes. Heliod is actually a really cool inclusion in the deck because, again, it ticks 2 different boxes. It ticks both life gain and +1/+1 counters. Mm-hmm. I found when I went through and kind of categorized the deck into what the different things it does do. That was English. I went through and categorized the deck into what the different win conditions are, and life gain and +1/+1 counters are the majority of them, with a little bit of what I'm calling rectangle theory win con, which is like the things like the Liliana's contract, which is like, oh, you have 4 of these, or the happily ever after, which is you need a bunch of things. It's a bunch of things win cons, like Halo Fountain. Which they all kind of help other ones as well, but life gain and life gain and +1/+1 counters are the 2 main win conditions of the deck. So having things like Heliod in here is very cool.
Yep.
You could just throw in what's the thing that Heliod combos with?
Walking Ballista.
Yeah, just throw Walking Ballista into this deck. You're already playing Heliod.
I got
22
excited.
ways to win.
Yeah, I got excited because I thought Walking Ballista was in here because I saw an artifact.
Walker.
Yeah, I saw an artifact creature.
Was so good.
Curses.
What's Hangerback Walker doing in here? Counters?
Counters and creatures, I guess.
It taps to put a counter on itself, and if it dies, you get a bunch of creatures, which helps with the Halo Fountain. I totally get it, but also, my goodness.
One last different card I would say either swap into or add in here if you end up backboning a little bit more on that synergy that I was talking about of the Seedborn Muse and the Helix Pinnacle. This feels like a great deck for the Millennium Calendar as well. If you're already doing that thing of untapping during somebody else's turn, double the counters on the counter, build it up, it goes twice as fast as Helix Pinnacle.
It's true. Well, actually, we'll go significantly faster than twice. It'll go 4 times as fast. Even though you won't get the counters on other people's upkeeps, you just untap and double the counters. So you actually are going to get more than just untapping your stuff on other people's upkeeps.
Yep.
Yeah, very cool. Millennium Calendar is sick in here.
So then I guess, to you on where's your idea on where you could fix this. But that's the notes that I had as far as if you're buying this as is and you don't want to do radical changes to the deck, there's a couple suggestions on things that you could just kind of tweak as is for a little bit. But take us through how we revamp it from the ground up.
All right. So I got pretty surgical with it. I wanted to keep with the theme that they're handing us, because I do actually think it's cool. Like at the end of the day, 5-color alt win cons with the Go Shantai as your sort of enchantment commander. I actually like that. I think that it's a neat idea that I wanted to just make better. So I kind of went through and went, well, if I was building this deck, how would I do it instead? So I removed 14 cards from the deck and I added 14 cards in. So I'll talk through the things that I'm removing. Monologue tax, get out of here. That card is so bad. My goodness, that card is rough. We already talked about it with the Male's Aria. I hate anything that doesn't do anything on its own. So there's a lot of times, especially in slower pods, where monologue tax is going to do basically nothing for you. I understand how it's going to get you some treasures sometimes and how that is helpful for a few of the win cons. There's like 3 of the win cons that care about treasures, so I don't want monologue tax in here. Again, we need more card draw. We need more actual support pieces.
Yeah.
So took that
and
out.
you know what? Just noticing it, yeah, to its credit with this deck as well, like you do have Mystic Remora in here. That is cool.
Yeah. Oh, I did leave that in. I thought I cut that card. Yeah, Mystic Remora is fine in here for card draw. There's some world where you sacrifice it to the upkeep trigger and then you pay 5 and bring it back. There's some world where you do that.
That's really silly.
I don't know if that's really what I want to do with 5 mana, but you could.
Right. What's next?
Okay, tell me your thoughts on them including Pariah in this deck.
Probably it's in here for the same reason there's other lockdown opponents like Darksteel Mutation and Ghostly Prison and like Ghoulish Impetus that like you
can enchant opponent's creature with Pariah.
Yes, and
I'm so used to like enchanting a stuffy doll with Pariah.
Right,
like,
and
what are we doing with this?
Yeah, and that's certainly something you could do in here as well, because there are cards like you talked about, like there is Heliod in here. There are also some other creatures with really large toughnesses. There is also a Yahenni that can get indestructible. So like you can do some shenanigans with it a little bit, and it's probably here for the reason of you need to play control game a little bit until your pieces are set up.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, I'm cutting Yahenni from this deck.
Okay, well,
there's just no world where you're sacrificing creatures. Like, there's so few in the deck, and they're all so important that like I'm not sacrificing any of them. I understand that he gets +1/+1 counters when other stuff dies. That's fine. I don't want to just rely on like, oh, your opponent has blocked with something and it dies, and now Yahenni gets a +1/+1 counter, and sometimes we're going to try to make him indestructible. It just seems too loose and too like easily blown out, you know. But I see what you're saying. Pariah enchanted on him. Now I don't know why I didn't realize that you could Pariah somebody else's thing and then use your Go Shantai to reanimate it after that creature dies.
Even then, enchanting somebody else's creature, it's a 1-turn fog.
Well, again, the cool thing that they're trying to do is that creature then dies, Pariah goes to your graveyard, you use Go Shantai, and you reanimate it again. But even then, you're not going to get that but more than once per turn unless you have the Seedborn Muse out. Mm-hmm. With Seedborn Muse out, this is cool, but like, wow, we are in Christmas land right now where we have Go Shantai, Pariah, and Seedborn Muse, and nobody's interacted with us. And
somebody else has a creature to play it on.
For sure.
You know what I mean? And Pariah does nothing to stop a combo, so...
Exactly. So, cutting the Pariah, cutting the Monologue tax. I'm cutting Shiny Impetus as well. You're fogging one creature, you're goading one thing, and making one treasure per rotation on this. It's just not good enough for me to want in here. Again, the Impetus they included. I do like the other one, the Ghoulish Impetus.
That one is in the naturally. Deck. Yep.
Yeah, that one rules. Because as soon as something dies, exactly, it comes back on its own. I don't want to have to pay 5 mana to bring back my removal spells. That's not what we're trying to do here. Cutting the Shiny Impetus, cutting Yahenni. I'm cutting Lightning Greaves from here.
Really?
Since we're playing Recursion. Like, we don't care if something really dies. I guess there's a world where you might want that, but again, I just think it's too slow. Like, we need to actively be trying to win the game. Trying to like set up too much of a defense, you're just going to sit there and not win. So maybe it's controversial, but I'm cutting Lightning Greaves from the deck.
Okay.
Similarly, there's an Icelid of Life's Bounty in here. I see the cool thing that they're trying to do, again, with sacrificing an enchantment creature, and then you can pay 5 and bring it back, and then you just get to keep your Go Shantai around. Way too slow. Sun Titan I'm cutting from this deck. What do you think about that?
There's just not enough targets in here for it. I'd say again, the Alicid is an interesting hit. Uh, like if you lose the Biovisionary, and then again some of the other enchantments that are 3 or less, like the Impetuses and the Pariah,
Yeah,
and
just
things like
too
that.
again, too expensive to not be actively trying to win the game, you know? Last couple of things we're cutting here. I cut a Razor Verge Thicket from the deck because A, I don't like the fast lands in Commander, but B, we're swapping in an Urza's Cave. Easily.
Sounds right.
Absolutely. Cutting that. I already said we're cutting Drown in Dreams. We're cutting a Clever Concealment. Similarly, it's like phasing out a bunch of stuff for a bit. It seems fine, but isn't really going
Phases
to
out
help us too
non-land
much.
permanents though.
Yeah, totally.
That's cool. I mean, Teferi's Protection does the same thing, but
Exactly, right. It could just be a Teferi's Protection.
yep.
Cutting a Supreme Verdict. I don't really want to destroy my own stuff. All of the other board wipes in the deck, you can kind of control what gets a blown up of yours, and Supreme Verdict you can't, so I'm cutting that. The Eerie Ultimatum I'm cutting, because what on earth?
Get back all your things.
Okay. For what, 7 mana? Get them back and then still have to wait until the next upkeep to do anything? I'm cutting it. Last 2 cuts here. Cutting the Augur of Autumn. Just kind of a weird, doesn't really ramp you, it just lets you look at some lands at the top. And you can cast creature spells, which there's only 26 of in this deck. Most of your spells are enchantments, sorceries, and instants, so the Augur of Autumn doesn't really help you too much for card advantage. And then I'm cutting this Ariok Champion. What are they doing, dude?
It's a Soul Sister.
It's a Soul Sister. I get it. It's neat. So I'm cutting that. So let's talk about what we're adding into the deck.
Yeah, talk to me.
Like I said, I'm not adding any new win conditions. I'm just adding support for them. So the first thing that I went through is looked at any of the shrines that help to support any of our any of our win cons, and there's plenty of them. So we have Goshentai of Boundless Vigor, which is 1 and a green for the 1/1 shrine with trample. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay 1 and put a counter on target shrine for each shrine you control. That seems like that's what we want to do. Goshentai of Lost Wisdom. Similarly, is 2 mana at the beginning of your end step. You can pay 1 if you do target player mills X cards, where X is the number of shrines you control. I actually think that we want to target ourselves with this more often than not. So we can kind of play this graveyard recursion thing that Goshentai wants to be doing anyway. So you target yourself. This is a sort of card advantage by filling your own graveyard and then being able to pick enchantments out of it with the Goshentai. I thought that was super cool. Sanctum of Calm Waters is just a regular enchantment shrine. Beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you may draw X cards, where X is the number of shrines you control, and discard a card. Sanctum of Fruitful Harvest is a shrine, 3 mana. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of shrines you control. We definitely want to be adding a ton of mana in this deck, and this really helps us out. This is super good with things like the Helix Pinnacle or like the Simic Ascendancy. You make like 7 or 8 mana off of this, and you can just dump it all somewhere. Love that one. I am throwing a Sanctum of All in this deck as well, just to help tutor out some of these shrines and trigger additional shrine abilities. We have the Hondens now. Did you know there's 3 different, well, you play a shrines deck, but there's 3 different types of shrines to be playing. There's Hondens, there's Sanctums, and there's Goshentais.
Yep.
So Honden of Life's Web. At the beginning of your upkeep, you make a 1/1 spirit creature token for each shrine you control.
Yep.
That one rips in this deck. Oh my goodness.
Because that gives us targets for the counters. It helps boost us towards the Halo Fountain.
Exactly. Honden of Life's Web might be the best one in here. Actually, I think that's the only Honden that I'm including in here. I like Sanctum of Stonefangs in here a lot. It's life gain, it's damage. So at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, each opponent loses X life, you gain X life, where X is the number of shrines you control. This is going to be like 8 or 9 most of the time with your Goshentai and your Sanctum of All. Like, we're actually pumping some shrine support into this, which is just incidentally going to be helping out all of our win conditions. And then
Now in doing so, you may end up throwing a little bit more of a target onto Go Shintai of Life's Origin
yeah,
if you
of
have more
course,
shrines in here, but I suppose it would probably take the heat off of a little bit of your win con cards if everyone's going after Go Shintai more often.
100%.
But then you end up in this weird state of like, okay, so when your win con cards go to the graveyard and Go Shintai can't stay on the field, then
Then the Fruitful Harvest makes you a ton of mana and you just recast your commander. I really don't think it's going to be that big of a problem to do this. I lied. There's one more Honden we're including, which is the Honden of Cleansing Fire. 3 and a white at the beginning of your upkeep, you gain 2 life for each shrine you control.
Yep.
Life gain is a huge thing that we're trying to do. So like I said, the win conditions in the deck I have separated out into card draw win cons. So that's things like the Triskaidekaphile. It's the 20-toed toad. And I'm including Approach of the Second Sun as a card draw win con as well, because you want to draw into it as a second time. So now we have 13 total pieces between our win cons and our support pieces for the card draw. For our counter win cons, that's the Simic Ascendancy, that's the Male's Aria, and that's all of them. We have 10 more cards that support that. We have life gain.
You could throw the 20-toed toad in there too.
Yeah, exactly. 20-toed toad is kind of a counter win con as well.
He fits both.
For sure. For the life gain win con with all the shrines, we now have the Test of Endurance, and we have the Felidar Sovereign as our win conditions, and we have 6 pieces that help support that. And then with the Rectangle Theory win cons, that is our Happily Ever After, that is our Liliana's Contract, and that's our Halos Fountain. That is 8 pieces of support towards those. So as you can see here, we've balanced the deck by adding shrines in, where it's like no matter what win con you have, there's somewhere between 8 and 10 pieces of support for each of these. The last couple of win cons that we've included is ramp win cons in here. So that is your mostly your Helix Pinnacle. If you can just make 100 mana, you win the game. So you got that one. What was the other one? Was that the only ramp win con that I have in here?
Maze's End?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm including land win cons as a separate one, but that's the Maze's End as well.
Okay,
but yeah,
okay.
you ramp a bunch, you play the maze, you search out a bunch of stuff. For the maze, I actually wanted to include a bunch of support for that, even though it's only one piece, because it incidentally is going to help fix our mana as well.
It's a good one to support, because being a win condition on a land, it's much harder to get rid of.
Definitely. So, like I said, I've already cut a land and added the Urza's Cave into here, which just sacrifices to find a land card, puts it on the battlefield tap, so you can go and find that. I'm also throwing a crop rotation into this deck. Sack a land, go find something, put it on the battlefield. Super, super easy, super good. A handful of other little pieces that I threw in here that I was really proud of, that I found just to support a bunch of different things. So I want to throw an Obika Splitter of Seconds into this deck. This is the 4 mana. It's Grixis. It's a 2/5 from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. It has Menace. And when it deals combat damage to a player, you get that many additional upkeep steps after this phase. So it'll go untap, upkeep, draw, main phase, combat, upkeep as many times as it's dealt damage. Mostly for the purpose of almost all of our win cons say at the beginning of your upkeep, you win whatever. So having something like Obika in here, and to some extent, I threw in a Shadow of the Second Sun as well, which gives you an additional beginning steps at the end of your main phase. You don't have to wait a whole turn rotation in order to win the game with any of these. So this is kind of my general purpose. If you're playing anything that cares about upkeeps or winning at the upkeep, I would go with these.
Which is a few of the shrines as well, because
that's what I was gonna say. A handful of the shrines, like the Hondens, that go at the beginning of your upkeep, or the Sanctum of All, which searches for shrines on your upkeep. All of those are gonna get benefited by having extra upkeeps as well. The Shadow of the Second Sun specifically acts sort of like another Seedborn Muse as well, where it untaps all of your lands for you.
You get a whole beginning phase.
You get a whole untap to untap all your lands. You get a whole upkeep to do all of your upkeep triggers, including maybe winning the game. And then you get to draw a card. So it replaces itself. It's card advantage. It's kind of perfect for this deck. It also is a big old enchantment that you can reanimate if you mill it into your graveyard with the Sanctum of Calm Waters, or sorry, the Goshen Tide of Lost Wisdom. This all, as I started digging into the shrines, I was like, this is actually the glue that holds this deck together that they could have just included. Especially because as you cast the shrines, the Goshentai makes extra shrines that are 1/1s, which we want to have in the deck. We want to have more creatures for all of our rectangle theory stuff. So big fan of all of those. Cetacean Champion is fire in this deck.
It's the best enchantress they've ever made.
Yeah, it's so good. So this is the one, it's a 3-mana 1/3 with Constellation. So whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on it and you draw a card. Those are two really important things, and we have how many enchantments in this deck? Like 20?
With how many more that you've added, yeah.
Right. And that also will count for all of the additional shrines that are made with Goshentai. That's going to count for all of the shrines that we're adding to the deck. Like, it's such an easy win in here. So that's the Cetacean Champion. Last one that I'm really stoked on is Glunch the Bestower.
Talk to me about Glunch.
Okay, so he's a 3-mana 1/5. He's a jellyfish with flying, okay? At the beginning of your end step, you choose a player. They put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature. You tracking here? You choose a second player to draw a card, and then you choose a third player to create 2 treasure tokens. There are times, like, he helps you win on, like, any of them. You can just pick which one you need to win. He checks more boxes than any other creature in this deck. Okay, let's say I drew the Hellkite Tyrant, and now I need 20 artifacts. I'm going to choose myself to make treasures, also with the mechanized production, also with the Revel in Riches. If I drew any of those, Glunch is going to make me treasures. Let's say I drew Simic Ascendancy, and I need to put counters on stuff. I'm choosing myself to put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature. Let's say I drew 20-toed Toad. I'm going to choose myself to draw a card. It's so good, and it's just an 0/5 with flying. That thing blocks like a champ. So like you said about needing protection for the deck and kind of needing to lock people down, just having an 0/5 flyer that's giving out stuff is, you're just going to sit there. No one's going to touch you for a while. So overall, with those 14 inclusions to the deck, I think, and I've play tested it a bit, it still is a bit of a mess. It's just you just have to go into this understanding that it's going to be a messy deck. Like, there's just no real good way to play this. You're going to, half the time, you're going to be drawing the wrong half of your deck. So truly the way to do it would be to play Demonic Tutor and a bunch of these other things that you can tutor out the pieces that you need. I appreciate that there's some fun to be had here. You know, there's times where you just want to play a fun deck that maybe is going to do its thing and maybe isn't. And this is definitely that deck that probably more often than not isn't going to do what it wants to do.
I look at something like this, and if you were to purchase this as this deck as is, give it your go at least once, and then like lose a bunch of times, whatever. I kind of look at this pile and see it's like the skeleton of, I'd say, about at least 2 different decks.
Yeah, for sure.
At least, you know what I mean? Like, grab out of here all of these enchantment-based win condition cards. Remove back some of the creatures and play more of a enchantment, reanimate them off of Goshentai, add some shrines, play the wrath control sort of thing, make everybody else attacking each other, and then you're winning the game with stuff like gaining life off your opponent's creatures and stealing their artifacts with like the Hellkite Tyrant, and then +1/+1 counters on your things for all the other stuff in here that cares about this. And then there's like a completely separate deck in here of like especially taking the lands out. Like, I think like maybe all of this pile would
make a Maze's End deck. It's so cool.
Yeah, maybe all of this pile would be a bit more consistent if they had a more stable land base to help really support it, or like be a
For
bit
sure.
like narrow it down on what kind of colors this deck is trying to be. Yeah, I think you could really try to get something here if the Gates package comes out. Take the Gates package out, build something else different with that, add a better support system into this one, and you've got about 2 different alt WinCon decks out of one box.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I appreciate that they priced it at a price point where you are gaining value by buying it. So if you do want to just piece it out, it still is a worthwhile buy in that case. Not to mention or go into the fact that secret layers are always scalped and you could resell it or whatever. Not that I would recommend scalping in any way. I think
No,
that's
of course
a
not.
really
But
sleazy
we
way
have
to go about making money. But
Yeah, but we have seen historically from the other secret layer precons, like the commander one specifically, of which you forgot about two of them, by the way.
did
That
I?
the 5-color transform one and the mono white angels one.
Oh my God, cute to brute. Forgot
Yeah.
about that. That also,
Um.
God, that was a mess as well, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
We weren't around
Um.
yet to fix it.
These cards that have alternate artwork on them typically are on the aftermarket for significantly higher than the actual card
For
is
sure.
worth. So
Well, and some of
this
these alt win cons are kind of pricey. Like the Helix Pinnacle is like $12 to $15 right now. So
I get, yeah,
having an alt win con deck is gonna hold some value.
Revel
So
and Riches, I
that's
think,
cool.
same thing.
Yeah, same.
So, yeah, I guess there is value to be had with this package as a whole, but it's just going to be very tough, I feel like, to get it going out of the box as is.
For sure.
But I suppose that is maybe part of the pull of something like this, is like, give this deck a whirl, find out what win condition cards you like, pull them out from here, build something fresh with it.
Yeah, I actually think you could narrow this deck down to Bant pretty easily. Most of the win cons are in that color scheme. You have a handful of them, like the Hellkite Tyrant and the Revelin Riches, that are just not, in blue, white, or green. But for the most part, it's a blue, white, green deck. So you could narrow this down, find a cool card advantage commander, maybe the Galadriel from the book set that you remove counters from stuff to draw cards, or something like that. So there's plenty of cool. Or wait, maybe I'm thinking of something different. Hold on, that was not Galadriel. It's the one from New Capenna, the Bant dragon from New Capenna. Come on, Oracle.
The Bant bird demon, Falco Spara, Pact Weaver.
Falco Spara Pact Weaver would be a sick card in this because you care about counters and card draw and all of these things that would be a great commander to do. A Falco Spara alt win con deck, that's sick. That's really sick. So yeah, I think I'm with you. Like, buy this, shred it, take it apart, tear it to pieces, find some cool things to do with it if you're going to buy it. Any parting thoughts on this, John, before we wrap it up?
No, I think that's it. Like, I hope that, like, this is going to sell out because how their new secret layer policy is, but like, I hope they learn something from this on the feedback. Is just like, just because you slap a fun style into it with alternate art pieces, that like, you're going to make money off of this, but no one's going to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I hope future precons at this price point are built better. Like, they've got some other good draw to want to get them.
Agreed. I doubt I'm ever going to sit down at a table across from this. There's just practically no way. And if they do, and they're like, oh, I bought the precon and I didn't adjust it, I'm like, sweet, you're not a threat.
Let's see how it goes.
I'm going to target somebody else.
Yeah.
You've hampered yourself. Oh, man. Well, I guess last question for you, John. Are you going to buy this deck?
Absolutely not.
Nice. Why don't you ask me the same thing?
Hey, are you going to buy this deck?
Absolutely not. I've saved myself $150 on this release.
Exactly.
Oh, man. Well, now I'll turn the question to the listeners. Are you guys going to buy this deck? I hope we haven't been too disparaging against it, and maybe have given you some ways, if you were excited about it, to tune it up and make it exciting and fun to play. Or I've given you some insight on what to do with it once you buy it. Thanks for listening.
Have by the time this is out, it will have been way past sale point.
True. Yeah. Maybe you already bought it. Did you buy it? That's our question.
Yeah.
Huh? Parting question is
in the future.
All right, everybody. This has been the MTG Thoughtcast. If you've stuck with us this whole time, thanks for listening. Appreciate you guys being here. You can jump in our Discord and tell us all about what you thought about this episode down below. This has been the MTG Thoughtcast. Once again, how many times can I say MTG Thoughtcast before we sign off from the MTG Thoughtcast? We'll see you guys next week on the MTG Thoughtcast.
before it comes a tongue twister. Thoughtcast.
All right, we'll see you guys.